I'll start with what I did not evaluate. I did not evaluate the permutation. I don't think that I can turn to them and say, here's where I felt like the 1AR said I extended. I do think it was, probably worth the attempt in the 2AR, but not something that was there. I think that this becomes a lot easier decision if it is there, or at least sort of some semblance of how to combine what that looks like in the 1AR. I do think that the negative is winning an argument that the use of the term suicide in front of bomber creates a social backlash. I definitely think that you've got an element of it sort of polarizes, it plays into this dominant mentality. The problem I have really is that there's not much of an explanation about why abandoning this term in all instances in a use in a singular form of language and sort of having a disad based around fear of one term interpreted a singular way is a good thing. In the end, I think that I don't know that the 2 and R is doing much to explain to me why avoiding suicide solves the AF. You've got like a DA, like a social backlash. I almost kind of call it, there's a social backlash DA to using the term. But I don't know why if I avoid the term, that challenges or offers recognizes the singularity of the suicide bomber, that we can't neatly define it. And so their AF in this instance seems to kind of solve back a lot of the reasons why if we say suicide bomber, there'll be this sort of social ramification, this social fallout. And the 1AR makes a very clear argument that, look, rejection does not end the term suicide. And so why does the counterplan end the term suicide? It seems like if that term is bad, the best hope for blowing it up and sort of changing it and not falling into the trap of a singular notion of what suicide means is to embrace the AF, which looks at all the possibilities for suicide bombing. Not just the right-wing interpretation, but all of the possibilities, because there is no singular one. So the bottom line is I don't know why it solves much of the AF. I don't know. And the other thing is the AF is the only one really extending an impact kind of throughout this debate, which is a value to life via recognizing singularity of that event. And if you had spent more time talking about I think your solvency evidence for your alt is really good, but I think the amount of time you spend on it in this debate does not allow me to give the credit that evidence offers. And so that evidence is really good to say that if we called them London bombers, it would be much preferable. And so had this debate been about London bombers versus suicide bombers, that's a much better way that I can compare at the end. You've got some sort of solvency mechanism. Here's what you wrap your head around. But when I was theorizing with the alts, I didn't know what I was theorizing in the context of the AF. I just knew it wasn't the DA. But I didn't know why it solved the AF. I didn't know why it changed the status quo mentality of suicide bombing. I just felt like the key part about a word pick is going after how they deploy the word. The key part about deploying a word pick against an AF that says there's no static meaning basically means you need to impact turn the AF and say there's a static meaning. So the word pick becomes less desirable when the AF says we don't defend anything we just said. And so you've really got to work hard to kind of get back to ground zero about the value of static language. That's how I reached my decision. I have a bunch of suggestions, and I want to be efficient about it because I know you all want to get out of here, but I want to pause to see especially if you all have questions about how I reached my decision before I offer comments.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And if I had more questions that come out as you these comments off.
I think that from a general negative strategy, it was really awkward for you not to thoroughly engage at least the impact level of this AF. Right, the Nietzschean dancing star, always beauty of life, value to life was it was the ultimatum. It was my decision calculus throughout this debate because you never challenged it. And so that made going for framework or going for this pick really hard. Right, your best argument is we link turn to AF, not I got a DA. Right? And so you needed something in this debate that's engages the Nietzschean question of embrace beauty or embrace the I don't know if we want to call him so dancing star. There's all sorts of like references to various sort of radical individuality, radical thinking. There's sort of like this value to life comes before everything else. We're the only access point. And once you concede that, man, I'm not an easy sell for the AF on framework, but in this debate it was kind of a crush because I felt like the AF had an impact. You got no counter impact other than we link turn your AF, but if they win, that your method cannot do it. So, okay, that was one major suggestion. The second one for the negative is be a little bit more on the framework page of a defense of what your debate looks like and why that's good. The 2NC was profoundly good on fairness precondition to understanding your arc, but was profoundly terrible on education sort of claims or why your form of debate is good. I don't care what happened in your debate. I'll find out about it later when you're complaining. All right, it sounds like complaining with all those 3 texts in a row. A few other quick ones. AF team permutation, make it clear. 1AR, I thought you did an awesome job on the framework page, and I thought in general, I gave you the highest points, and I thought you were good. But when you're running out of time like that on the suicide bomber page, I would have appreciated maybe just a little bit fewer arguments, and just kind of sitting tight on a few of them. You only real needed, we aren't the suicide bomber that you described. We are all examples, not just the one. And, you got no hope. It's going to be called that way in the SQO. We're the only hope to disrupt it. And I also felt like you all missed an opportunity to go after the sort of fear-based mentality of their net benefit in this round. The sort of, we can't do it because the conservatives might manipulate and utilize you. That sort of politics was one that I think, I don't know what your kind of 1AC evidence speaks to, but your genre of argument is that's dumb. And so some sort of a claim about why the net benefit in this debate, a little bit more specific kind of crystallized argument as to the net benefit logic is problematic because it's based upon a fear that conservatives will attach a mentality. And maybe just a more explicit argument that we should be ignoring social fears. And so, kind of type of claim. That's all I got. The one in R kind of is, here's what our alt is instead of them, and sort of embraces. Problem is, I don't know if you're just the bombers, and if the bombers doesn't seem to solve the AF. If you're the London bombers, because they're part of a larger plot, that seems to be what your solvency evidence is about, but then you run into permutation problems. But this lack of an alt and sort of what you were defending is really devastating to this debate.
I should describe that.
Yeah, and 2AC, there's, a little bit, you're fine. All right, thoughts, questions, concerns?
He asked a question.
Yeah, how do you think I should describe the alternative?
Your evidence says the London bomber. And so you could say, you could say the Al-Qaeda bomber, or you could say, I guess the London bomber in this instance your author said was good because it allowed sort of a geographic understanding where a bunch of confluence events were coming together. Basically, just defend what your author described, and then kind of say that, this term is poison, and then you really need to be ready for, we must interrogate, must investigate, we rethink the term. And point out places, in order to make a word pick work, what you have to do is point out the places in the 1AC where that word was used uncritically. Mm-hmm. And you need to literally say, the third paragraph of this piece of evidence, the author uses it this way. It is not in a critical lens that has a singular notion of what suicide means. It is, or at least kind of, here's where they did it. And otherwise, it kind of allows them to say, it's not our suicide bomber. And that's the classic trick. And you did a fairly good job to talk about this social role. Oh, last thing. Role of the judge, sort of situatedness. if the neg team's argument is that you are endorsing a political activist strategy to try and get people on board, then it makes the social argument very important. If this debate never leaves the room, if I'm only an intellectual who endorses the concept and I'm smart enough to figure out the right wing from the left wing for myself, then that means I'm probably not responsible for these social ramifications. And that is a good sort of trick to get out of their impacts that was not sort of, the role of the judge was not deployed by either side and could have been to help magnify your impact. All right.
Appreciate it.
No problem. This sounds like a